All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of 49 Volts. I'm your host, Josh, and Kyle Baker is our guest today. It's the first one not to dance. Kyle does not appear to be a rock music guy.
I'm a dancer. I was just trying to keep myself composed.
You did
for some reason wasn't expecting the rock music, but
nobody ever is. Nobody ever is. Kind of feels like a new version of Footloose, right? Just can't be playing that rock music. But Kyle, thanks so much for coming on, and just give everybody just a quick intro to yourself and Sophia Consulting and Integration, what you're all about.
Yeah, so Kyle Baker I live in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm from Spokane, Washington, but transplanted to the South, and started Sophia Security and Datacom. Now we changed our name recently, DBA, but make it a little more simple for the customers. But started in 2020, May of 2020, so 2 months after COVID shutdowns. Just felt confident and was kind of too far in my planning stages to let it wait any longer. So jumped in there, and been growing for the last 4 years, a little over 4 years. We're at 10 people now, and serving the area. It's been great.
Now, your growth has been really exciting to watch. I know I'm not alone. We've all been really rooting for you and watching you grow. But how did you get the idea to start Sophia?
It's there's a lot of details in that. I think the main things was, so I kind of have a background coming from church ministries, things like that, where I gotten exposed to doing leveraging business in context overseas, spent some time overseas, and was just kind of looking for ways to leverage where I was right now, kind of have a more purpose-driven, meaningful business. Had been working in the golf industry and stuff prior to that, and kind of got out of it just because it didn't have a lot of impact or meaning on people's lives outside of it's just a fun game, But so I think having worked in the industry at that point for only 2.5 years when I launched, my ideas really circled around a couple things. One is one started with the employees. Felt like there was a culture in low voltage and in system integration that was there was just a lot of infighting. There was a lot of jumping company to company because techs run happy here. There's a lot of pressure here, sales pressure, all this kind of stuff. There wasn't a lot of great company cultures to look at. So I felt like I could create a workspace, man, where people could come to work hard and be proud of what they do and pursue excellence, and but also just be cared for and valued and know that they have a voice, and that the technician has just as much a voice as the sales guy, has just as much a voice as the executive. And there's a little less, just a little less infighting. So that was one part, was I just really wanted to create that kind of culture and expose people to the trade. So there was that, and then the name and kind of how we approach the marketplace. So that's always the why is the employees and the opportunities we're creating there. But the means of doing that is system integration, and I had a background in surveillance and access control, and then kind of grew a passion for the structured cabling side as we got going. But the name Sophia means wisdom in Greek, and one of the things that I just saw in the marketplace that was missing was customers kind of being guided in wisdom and being led to make more wise decisions. So at the end of the day, the customer is responsible for making their decisions, but as an integrator, if you aren't educating them and if you aren't giving them the resources to make decisions that are well informed, that's on us. And so I just felt like that was a gap. And wanted to kind of fill that. And so, that was kind of the marketplace strategy, was let's just be different by caring and guiding people in wisdom.
Now, if someone gives you trouble, do you take them out on the golf course and just totally obliterate them? Most people aren't very good at golf.
I'm decent at golf. There's definitely guys out there who can wax me as well, but most people would envy where I'm at. So.
That is the hardest game I've ever not been good at.
So hard, man.
I got into the 80s maybe 10 years ago, where I could consistently shoot in the 80s, and I didn't play for 6 months because I was so busy and I couldn't even hit the stupid ball anymore. I was back to like a 130. I mean, it is really something how hard that game is. So
it is hard, and it'll mentally challenge you.
Yeah, it probably is a lot mental. That's crazy. So obviously, from the outside looking in, it seems like your plans have been going really well. I see a lot of great things about Sophia out there, and it looks like you're growing. I mean, was it harder or easier than you expected, when you came up with this idea?
So I don't try to paint a picture that everything's definitely going well. We have been very fortunate and blessed with a lot of referrals, and like I said, when we take care of people and we do the right thing, the growth, the opportunities have actually been very easy to come by. That said, this is the hardest work and the hardest 5 years of my life, as far as the responsibilities, the work, the stress, that especially the first like 2.5, 3 years took on like a toll on me. So by no means, entrepreneurship is very difficult. Definitely lessons that I learned in the process that, I would do things differently if I had an opportunity to start over, but you don't. So you just learn from them and you go. I think the biggest thing for me is, I had a business partner kind of lined up to start with me, and they backed out last month of doing that just because some things with their family. And so I was just far enough in that I was like, well, I got to do this now. And I would never do business alone again. I think that's one lesson. If I could pound into people, I would. And you get a lot of advice to not do business with people because partnerships fail, and there's a lot of messy partnerships. I think there's just a right way to do it at the end of the day. But me personally, maybe other people are built for it, so it's not universal advice, but I would never do it alone again. And now I've got a business partner, Bo Burnett, rock solid human and great at his work. And so, we balance each other really well. And so I've been really thankful for that. But yeah, we've definitely grown. We've not struggled to get opportunities and grow financially or, in our work, but the work has been hard. Executing it to the level that we desire has been hard. And it's been challenging.
It is not easy to build a business. Somehow it always looks easy once it's already built, from the outside looking in, but it's tough, right? I mean, you probably go through a lot of days where you just think, why am I doing this? And I need to go find a job somewhere because it's going to kill me.
It was a lot easier when I was a manufacturer's rep or something,
right?
It works a lot easier. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of late nights, pounding your head in QuickBooks or putting together a proposal, or, I remember one of the roughest stretches was like we were traveling down to like 4 hours from Birmingham to finish a job like over a summer, and it took about 4 weeks longer than we thought, and we were right up on the deadline, and I was in there wiring access control panels at like midnight. The last, working 20-hour days, the last 5 days of that project to get it done, and I never wanted to see that town again for a while.
And you work that hard, you get the blessing of also doing your books and all your business filings and everything else.
Insurance
continues. We become experts in all of the business regulations, whether we meant to or not, right?
Yeah.
So something I've noticed is, I feel like your branding and your marketing is really good compared to what I see in a lot of other low voltage companies. What I've seen over the decades, and that was really my idea for starting my company, was because it just seemed like there was something missing, but you've done really well with that. So, how has that impacted your growth? Do you think that, the marketing, the branding that you've done, has that shown some positive impact in your growth, or is it really just doing the work well and word of mouth? And
so I think there's a couple sides to that. One, my degree is in marketing, and I love it. I like the approach. Like for me, I'm more of a high level marketing kind of thought process, like understanding target markets and how do we position ourselves and those type of things. So that was really foundational in a lot of like my planning stage. Like for instance, as a low voltage company and knowing what I wanted to pursue is I knew that I did not want to be in residential work at all. I knew I didn't want to be in like AV work, and I knew I didn't want to be in a position where I was just saying yes to every job that came up because we needed the money. So for me, that started out as like, and I consider this as part of the marketing because I'm like viewing the market strategies and targeting where I want to go is I have to set myself up in a professional way to these end users, right? And so it made me take longer before I launched. So it ended up where I kind of worked on this in the background for about a year, and I had to teach myself a bunch of things. And I knew when I got going, I wanted to have, professional logo and vehicles marked, and be doing things where it's like, oh, this wasn't just like the trunk slammer or whatever everybody wants to call it, just popping up and didn't know who they were, kind of thing. This Joe Schmo company, I wanted to like, you have to present yourself in a certain way to play in some of these commercial spaces that I wanted to be in. And so I would say marketing had a very foundational place in how I founded the business. And then it was also just really fortunate, like as much as I love things like marketing, like the reason I'm not in marketing was because everything was entry level. You had to be digital content creators and I don't have that skill set at all. I have a good eye for things that I like. I know like that I could not create it, and it's just not in me to do that stuff. So wasn't going to be able to break into like marketing side of the business world, but it's super valuable. And so I was fortunate to have partnered with some people over the years that heard my heart, my passion, understood what I wanted to see, and were able to kind of tell a story through our visuals. That was really important to me. Our logo, the wing icon. So like, for instance, fun story, like you'll enjoy this. So Sophia, the icon over here is a wing. And I was playing around with some ideas. I knew the name and I knew the story behind like the name that I wanted. And, one of the symbols of wisdom is an owl. And I was like, I don't want a cheesy owl, but like, just throw this out there. Like, the person I was working with, I was like, if you can incorporate an owl and it not look cheesy, I would love that. It would be great. And there was kind of a side story. My family and I, like the house we lived on, there were some barred owls that were living in the trees around us, and my wife and daughter loved them. And so I thought it was kind of a cool connection there. So I wanted to keep the owl somehow incorporated. And, like he ran through like 3 concepts of stuff, and said he was just playing around with an owl image and ended up just kind of looking at the wing a little differently. He's like, oh, let me take this wing off and put it here. Because I told him, like, I want a standalone icon that's incorporated in the name. And that's how the wing came. So just things like that. It was intentional. Like does that matter? Does that get me sales? No, not necessarily on its own, but it's a part of our story. It's part of our intentionality. And then being able to take something that's good and clean looking visually. And then we're very big on just like branding our installation. So, took the time to get some designs done to put, big stickers on our access control enclosures, or little details like putting this Sophia sticker on our access control readers and on the cameras, things like that, they snowball. They are noticeable. People start to then pick up on it here and there. And then, our name and numbers everywhere and on our vehicles and stuff. So we get you don't get a lot of growth necessarily directly from those things, but it's more of like a tide that's kind of like building and swelling, that helps and contributes to it. So yeah, it's super important there. And I don't think we've nailed the outward marketing piece as far as like more advertising or like how we're drawing in kind of very random or seemingly random people yet. That's something that we're kind of exploring in the season we're in now. Do we want to do it? How do we do it? If we do it, how do we do it well? But yeah, that's kind of the marketing background.
Yeah, I mean, I think lead gen is a whole different discussion in and of itself, and you need to have a mechanism to process those leads if you do get any. But just to add on to what you're saying, I mean, I think it tells a customer, even if subconsciously, that when you're very intentional about everything you do, it's very clean, it's very thoughtful and well put together. I think there's a sense of confidence that the customer has that you're likely, to treat their work that same way.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay. I think one thing too that it's also helped with is like, we push the standard of our installation work, and we tell the guys like we need to be able to be proud to put our name on it at the end of the day. And there's a lot of companies that don't, and they install something and they're gone. And so that's kind of something we've used to challenge our technicians as they've grown, as well as, hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it the right way, to the point where our name's going on it and it better look a certain way. So.
No, I like that. That's great. So, with all of the decisions that come around, what type of services you want to offer when you're building a company, ultimately, then the process comes around to what product lines you're going to support. Mm-hmm. So, how do you make those kind of decisions? Because, I mean, I went through something very similar where I built an integrator for someone else with their money, and that went, I think, pretty well. But that was a big decision, right? So you have to have this vision and everything you're going to offer. And that's the next thing. Okay, who are we going to offer when we do this? So what was your process like for that? How do you make those kind of decisions?
Yeah. Another great question. So this is actually something I'm kind of struggling with now as we've grown a little bit, but was pretty rock solid on when we started, and kind of wiggling my way back down to the right place here. But one thing is that you have to be confident that you can be an expert in whatever you're installing. Mm-hmm. That's one thing I thought about. So there's that piece of it. It's got to be, you have to be streamlined enough in your product offerings that you can truly be an expert in those things. So that was important to me. And also understanding, some of the, like for us in the security world, we have to be adequate networking wise. Right. So we have to know enough to be able to communicate things and stuff, but we don't have to be network engineers and install firewalls and do all kinds of, programming stuff. But, I've got to know, I'm kind of limited here. So I need to keep that level of, our technology pretty straightforward and streamlined and simple and, whatever it may be. That was important to me. So we kind of have those two things. I want to be an expert in what we're supposed to be an expert at, and then the things that we don't, that I want to make sure that we're rock solid and I've kept it simple. The other thing is that we've got to be able to trust the people we're working with and the brand we're working with. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges in our industry. One of the things, like when I was on the manufacturer rep side, that, really pushed me into the integration side was that, that world well at all, like you could be selling one brand and they give you 30 days notice and you're done. And you could, put 2 years of legwork in and got them to a certain point, got a massive contract for them or whatever that wasn't ordered yet. And then boom, you're gone. And so there's a lot, one of the things I learned in that and kind of observing the industry this first couple of years was that there's a lot of, consuming of other companies going on. There's a lot of oh, so-and-so bought so-and-so, and the new companies that come out, the ones that are really making differences and making changes, they always seem to sell. And, to each their own, that's obviously their right to do that. It's just disappointing because, oh man, we're making waves and we're making progress and we're, this is different and it's unique and we are setting ourselves apart, and then next thing you know, they get swallowed up by a bigger company and the culture starts to change towards that bigger company. And so that's always a hard thing for me personally. So the local reps matter a lot, and the relationships there, but they're not going to be there forever. So then of course the brand matters a lot then at that point, because I've got to live with the brand when these sales reps and stuff change. And, at the end of the day, some brands do better at relating and connecting with the integrator level than others. And some, even if they're good at that, are terrible at tech support. And so like where does that matter and where does it fall in? So I don't think there's a streamlined equation. Unfortunately, I wish there was. I wish I had one and I could tell everybody what to do. But, for us, there's just a mix of those things. Like at the end of the day, like I've got to be able to trust the people and the brand there. And so finding the best mix of that plus the technical knowledge of, can I be an expert? And then when something is wrong, can their tech support truly support me?
Yeah.
So that because at the end of the day, the people that suffer are the end users, it's the customers. And the more disconnected the brand is from the customer, and they're connected to them through us, but if they don't care about like the issues I'm running into, then they don't care about the customer. And I care about the customer. So like there's that battle. And so really it's just it's an imperfect science. It's an art of, how do we find the right mix of this and then go to market?
It's a lot harder, I think, than 15 years ago when I built one from scratch. There's always been acquisition that takes place really in all types of business, but it certainly has accelerated over the last decade. Some of us may
venture capital and stuff that really is
the private equity economy that we're in. It used to be shocking to people, I think, sometimes when a very successful product would then become part of another product, and it would be very surprising. But now it's kind of hard to figure out who is going to stay themselves or not. And I think it's also a challenge too, because I grew up, I'm the oldest 46-year-old you'll ever meet because I grew up working in family businesses, right? So somehow I have 32 years of experience and I'm 46. So I feel like I've watched this huge transition where, in my younger years, I really had just as strong of a relationship with my local manufacturer reps as I did with the factory in many cases. And, that rep will have been there 20 years that they represent this product. They knew it better than probably a lot of the people at the factory that were kind of managing them. And, even on that side of it too. So as these acquisitions happen, also the, you mentioned that 30-day notice thing that happens. There's some of that is happening without acquisition, but now also you have it when the acquisition occurs. Now there's, okay, we don't use reps versus the company that we acquired did. So now we're going to get rid of them, or, we have our own reps that we want to use. It feels like a bigger minefield now trying to choose the product. So I imagine myself in that place. And I feel like you almost have to go with nowadays, you almost have to go like with the biggest possible brand that'll work with you, in hopes that, they're going to be the one buying somebody, and not the other way around. Right.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it, man. And that's a hard thing for me. It's like, when you're in certain phases and you're working with certain companies, like they can express a lot of genuine care about your business and your growth and all that. And then at certain points, like you're going to hit challenges where you're like, you're not like, this isn't working because as this thing is scaling, or because of this decision being made here, or what's needed in these environments. Like it can be really hard to stay with some of that. And so, I don't know if, I think part of it is just like the companies being honest and like rock solid on where they are. So in some cases, like you said, the larger companies are great at that because they can be like, yeah, here's what we can offer you. Here's the support channel. Here's the tech support. Here's how it is. And here's your resources. And this is who we are. And like, yeah, you've got to meet a quota or you've got to do this thing, but it's all laid out in front of you and here you are. And so you can, at least at that point, you can be like, well, I know the rules I'm playing under here versus like, it can be ambiguous, which sometimes working with other companies, the ambiguity can be kind of nice, but you certainly are going to hit challenges at other points. So,
well, and they're likely to change too, right? As they grow or get acquired, those rules are going to change as things go. But it's kind of interesting because I grew up on the integration side and then went to the manufacturer side of it, a decade ago. And you've kind of come the other way, right? So it's
with a lot less years though.
Well, appreciate the youth while you can. Never apologize for being young. But No, I mean, it's interesting to me because we used to make jokes, and we found it frustrating the way that salespeople would move around.
Yeah.
We almost thought like, well, you guys aren't very committed, and why would I buy from you when you keep, every time you come around, you got a different polo shirt on.
And now this is the best one. Yeah.
And then now I've experienced where you actually help build something from the ground up, and then it's, they sell it, you don't have a job anymore, so I mean, it's interesting how you then get, when you go from one side to the other, like you get a whole different perspective, and almost you have more appreciation or respect for what the other side deals with. So you're probably able to deal with those reps, especially the manufacturer reps that you're working with. And you have like an understanding. You're like, man, that's tough. Cause I was there. I know that you could build up a book of business and customers and do all the right things. And then, it seems like everybody's on a month-to-month contract now.
Yeah.
As a rep, and you just lose
quotas, man. They just like every time you perform, like now, okay, well now your quota's here. So it's like, that's one of those things that, is as an integrator looking at the manufacturer, if I were to give, the manufacturer advice, to be like, hey, when you do that to your sales guys, and like they've invested this time, and like, they brought the product in here, they taught it to us, they showed us these things, and, we trusted them. And then you keep dangling, you keep moving the carrot for them so much that they're leaving. Like that affects our business, that affects the customers, that affects all the customers they had before. But money's a motivator though for a lot of these things. So it is what it is.
It is. I mean, and of course it is anytime we're in business. But to me, it's always felt like an advantage to be on one side of the fence, knowing the other side really well. I think you can have an appreciation for what they're going through. And I have a feeling you found that beneficial, as you work with them, you kind of understand their perspective and what they're going through. And knowledge.
You can also pick out the bad ones a little easier.
Well, yeah. I mean, probably. I'll tell you, on the manufacturer side or on the rep side, even, I think you do get to know your region really well too. So you probably know what a lot of these people are all about, before they even call on you. So is there a product that you wish for, as an integrator, as a solution provider? Is there like a feature or a product that you're always wishing for that you just don't see out there, or you don't feel that the industry's given you what is needed?
So one of the big things for me has been the softwares that we utilize on the back end. There are some really good products out there, and there's just probably like a fact of it that you're never going to have all of your problems solved. But for us, like the biggest ones were our operations software that we got in place. And we landed in a place where like it's really solid. It's good. A lot of things were like my wheels are turning. I'm like, man, could I do something better than this? Because I feel like I could. Or the design software, the design and project management piece was one that. And so in both those places, we've had to settle in some areas, but I've landed on some really, really solid solutions. But honestly, I've had kind of some moments between some of the guys that I know that I've worked with and running the business myself and seeing how other people do it, that I feel like, man, if we had, maybe venture number 2 out here is like, can we develop something that is truly more streamlined and makes the workflow easier and puts everything in one place? And I said that's probably one of the bigger things. And I'd say outside of that, which is starting to happen a little bit more now, but we did a lot of our first couple of years, we did a lot of MDUs, like multifamily lofts, condos, kind of stuff. And from more of the system like integration side of like what we're actually installing is, intercom, video intercom and access control truly being on the same platform is like, I don't know why that's so bizarrely not there, but it's just not. So now there's some decent integrations now, and I'm finding a couple and all that, but that's one that for 3-4 years, I just pound the pavement on, asking every access control or intercom provider, like, well, what about this? And what about this? Well, how does this work? And people throw around the well, it's integrated this way, but what does integration mean to you? Like define what that integration is. And
Right.
you find people like you catch them in a little bit of, well, it's okay. Well, that's not useful. So I'd say that's one that I'm like, man, I just really feel like that can be done a lot better than it is. But
Yeah, I mean, there's a few examples of where they've kind of built out from that video intercom and built their own entire solution, like maybe a Butterfly MX comes to mind. But definitely, I think what you're saying is, you've got these really great video intercoms that are out there. I could think of several, but then it's like they have all these features and capabilities. Are they going to, or can you completely harness all of that and use all of that power? When you actually have your access control management, it's almost like they're not built for each other, kind of next to each other, right?
And really most of it just falls around this directory piece. Like, so, Butterfly's a good example of like they've kind of expanded into access control from
Right.
The intercom side. However, not a great dealer channel, things like that. So there's restrictions to us as like selling it. And this is another thing about aligning yourself with brands and companies. Like, yeah, if I need to be able to be, equipped as the person out there selling. And if I'm driving business that is beneficial in some way. And so,
Right.
and, the big RMR, recurring revenue idea that everybody's pushing for, if we don't get a piece of that, then it's pretty hard to sell it. Right. So there's a few brands that we've kind of stayed away from for things like that. But, this year, Butterfly, they expanded into the access control. And I think they even added cameras now. To their platform, which is probably really great. Like they'll probably make a big move because my biggest thing, and the reason I push for it so much is because after doing a couple is on the back end, I care about the customer. The customer is the property manager at that point. So you've got these developers, and depending on how the developer, like if they're more a local developer and not these like big national guys, like they're not going to care about streamlining the technology in the building. They said, oh, I know I need some security because my common areas have to be access controlled, and I need a few cameras just so that I can sell these units. And so they don't really care what goes in a lot of places. But then once they're gone, who does care is the HOA, and who does care is the property manager. And then the property manager has 8 other properties that they're doing, and they're all on different systems, and they've got to learn an intercom and an access control and a surveillance platform for all of them if they weren't, unified in some way. And so we were just like, hey, how do we make this easier? Where, hey, when somebody moves out, the property manager just goes, okay, boom, I pull them out of one platform, and now it affects the rest of them. That's the thing. So there's less touching and less vulnerabilities involved in that. Of like, oh, I've got to touch this platform and that platform and this one as part of an 8-step checklist of getting a tenant off of something.
I feel like the tenant management platform side of it, coming from MDU being so on fire and so busy over the last few years, has actually kind of pushed certainly security into some new areas, where you're actually kind of fostering some good process for the tenant and actually adding a little more value than just being able to open the door or not, right?
Yeah, and it's similar, and that's where, again, call it like a Butterfly. They've got a bunch of those integrations, but then, and I haven't seen the length of this, but you're integrating these platforms. How well do they actually integrate, and what level of detail can you get pushed down to all these others? Because the end goal of true integration is I connect these things and I touch one platform from there.
Right.
And most of the time, I do this, it's set up, and then I can do this much of it in the one platform. And then when I need to do these other things, I got to go back in and touch these other ones. And that's a pain, so to me, I'm like, if you're going to do an integration, do it fully baked to where it pushes all the way through and that you're in one platform. Another kind of example what you're talking about too is kind of this bigger picture, adding value outside of just opening doors, is visitor management and access control. I'm like, why aren't those working better together in some instances? Or why is that visitor management so disconnected? And now it's completely different platforms from access control platforms when they can go so hand in hand. Just some things like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, you talked again at the beginning of this, how important it is to think about the end customer and their experience. As an integrator, it's easier to picture what to log into based on what activity. But if you imagine the customer, none of this means anything to them. They're just trying to accomplish something. They don't know how it all comes together. They don't know what an access control panel is versus an NVR or cloud or what. They just want to log in and do what they need to do. So the more that you can do that in that single interface, I think makes their life much easier. I would think makes it almost easy to sell that product to that end customer. You say, hey, just go to one place and do all this. And it's hard because there's so many different products out there.
Yeah.
Finding the right combination, where they work together, provide everything you need, but also fully integrated and not just pieces. It's a challenge, right?
Yeah. It's one of the really refreshing things over the last several months. I brought in a person as a solutions consultant as part of our team, which is what we call our sales team, solutions consultants.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought in, he's brand new to the industry, learned a lot. So he's asked he's very observant, asked a lot of great questions. And the other day he was asking about camera lines, because we've gone to, I've had a couple reps come in and we talked through a few things. He's like, so what do you really feel like? Is this brand really that much better than all these other ones? Because that's what they keep saying. And then we're like, what is truly, these differences in these things? I said, well, I'll be honest with you, man. Like you put them in a shootout, like, yeah, they'll have a few models that beat this one, and this one will have a few models that beats this one and that one, and they have this feature and all of these cameras, and they have this feature and this number of cameras, whatever. And that's all great. That's all stuff we deal with. But at the end of the day, like, coming down to the customer, they don't care about that piece of it. Like, they're not going to be able, if you put all four of those cameras lined up, they're looking at all the images, like, then the level of detail that they're looking at difference wise, if they're similar, comparing apples to apples, they're not going to notice a difference, and they're not going to care about the difference that is there, because it's like, oh yeah, the greens are really good in this one and the whatever. They're not going to care as much about that. What they will care about is how they get their video. It's how they interact. Like, do they know how to log in? Can they get in on their phone? Can they get it on their computer when they need it? Like, can they export video without having to call us? Can they search through it quickly? How intuitive is it? Like, that's what they're going to see. So to me, like, the software matters a lot more than the physical camera itself. Obviously, a ton of detail to that, like integrations of, analytics, all that kind of stuff that matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but to the customer, they don't care. They want to know when they're in the software, what does it do and how and when.
Makes total sense. So the last question I'm going to ask you is a little bit of a thinker, because you probably are going to say you have 100 things you'd want to tell them. But if somebody, was wanting to follow your footsteps and nowhere near you, not a competitor, but, they're out in Iowa or somewhere else, and they said, you know what, I want to build the next great integrator, that takes care of their customers and does things the right way. I see what Kyle's doing. I want to do that. What's the single biggest piece of advice you would give that person?
Yeah. I will give you maybe two or three things that work together in this, but I think the first thing I would say is be intentional about what you're doing, why you're doing it, what brands you're labeling, like representing yourself with, who your customers really are. Without the intentionality, kind of laying the groundwork, there's just too many different directions you can go, and you'll get pulled 1,000 ways, and you'll not be really that good at anything, and you'll feel stressed out. And then the other thing is building your team around you. Now that can be in the startup phase, that could be business partners, it could be just how your family or friends are supporting you, it could be peer groups of folks who have already launched businesses and done that. So like part of it, and it costs money to do some of those things. Like, it costs money to be intentional, and it costs, time. It's, it may delay when you start bringing in revenue, but building a team and being intentional are, to me, two of the most important things you can do. Because the team part of it is you're always going to have to wear a lot of hats as a business owner, as a startup. But if you operate, too often in your like kind of working frustrations, and you operate outside of your strengths and outside of what you're good at for long enough, it really beats you down. It wears on you a lot. And so, yeah, you've got to be able to put on the hat and then give it to somebody else. And then even just like, having the think group, whether again, some people that maybe your spouse, but friends, or finding other small business owners that you can bounce things off of and talk through your frustrations, and who can point you to, hey, here's the lawyer that you need to talk to get this set up, and here's a CPA that you need to talk to. I've been using them for X number of years. Just having some of that input and advice can make all the difference in the world. It can free your time, free of a lot of stress, but you got to be intentional about seeking those things out, because they're not just going to come around you. So otherwise you'll find yourself just, toiling and kind of drowning under all the work.
Other than that, no big deal, right?
Easy enough. No biggie. No biggie. I'll give one more piece to that. This is, again, same thing. And being intentional of it is like, put an end to your workday. Like, you've got to stop at some point, because the work will always be there, and it will never stop. You'll never be caught up. And so I would say one of the things that my wife was great at was, even when I was like starting up, it was like, we got to do this or we're not going to get paychecks. Like, hey, be home for dinner because your daughter's here. And okay, like we figured it out. I worked, 8 to 10 hours, and I was home, and was home on the weekends. And that's really hard to do as a business owner, especially when a lot of us men especially are really motivated by that kind of achievement, and getting the work done and being responsible and doing these things. But the work's always going to be there, and you're never going to be caught up. So just at the end of the day, like, you got to set an alarm or whatever, put an end to the work day, be home, go find somewhere to fill yourself up and get your mind off of it so you can attack it better the next day.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds like also what you're saying is make sure that you understand what is most important, how to prioritize and focus on those things first. And that to-do list is now continuous. It is a continuous scroll that will never, ever stop. You can't keep scrolling and get to the end of it. So focus on what matters most. And a lot of that noise goes away anyways, right?
Yep.
No, that's great. Well, again, very excited to see all of your success. I mean, I think I first met you maybe 4 or 5 years ago when you were pretty early in the process. And I mean, it's just awesome to see somebody work so hard and put it all together. And I'm sure you're going to walk away from this and say, boy, I fooled him. Right. We always, but I think you're doing wonderful. And I think a lot of other people do too. So we're all happy to see it, but make sure, if there's any customers that maybe are watching this or see this out in your area, how do they find you?
Yeah, so you can, sophiaconsulting.io is our website. You can get there. All our contact information is there. You can also on Instagram or Facebook, sophiaconsulting.io. That's all our handles on everything. So yeah, reach out. LinkedIn too. I'm on LinkedIn a decent bit now, trying to leverage that platform, which has actually been really powerful. So reach out to me on LinkedIn, Kyle Baker, and would love to connect. I'm making a lot of connections on LinkedIn recently.
Absolutely. I can vouch. Kyle's a good follow, good connection on LinkedIn. So again, congrats on everything and best of luck moving forward. And, if you're out in that area, looking for a little help, I think Kyle and his team will take really good care of you. And in the meantime, that'll be the end of this episode. We'll have another episode of 49 volts for you next week. Thanks everybody. And thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.